Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that introduction, Joe. Joe also gave me some tips on what I needed to do for you this afternoon. That was to enthuse and excite. However, unfortunately, I went to the loo, washed my hands, and now I need to euthanize and incite. So hopefully that doesn't change the content of my presentation at all. There you go. I'm head of commercial, not quite commercial director, but essentially it means I do a lot of the same things for LLWR. We're only a small company, so you tend to wear a few more hats, or have a few more responsibilities sometimes. My presentation will match the format and content levels of some of my predecessors. In Show Dutter's presentation before, he said thank you for some of the work that LLWR has done. That's made my day, actually. I don't normally see stuff like that, but we provide waste services or facilitate waste services to much of the UK nuclear industry, which we are very proud of doing. And it's good to get some feedback. So, I'm going to talk about our business a little bit in words, a little bit in numbers, and then talk about the business in the environment it's operating, and also what we're doing within the business. So, four quarters, and we'll quickly step through those things. So, I've taken this off our website. Those are the words because they describe fairly concisely what we do as a business. I talked about the waste services bit, but also running the repository. Those are the examples of the two things. You can see a picture of the repository there on the top right, but also we run the National Waste Programme on behalf of the NDA, so we do a load of data analysis and collection and reporting and things, which kind of allow you to get an indication of some of the volumes of waste that we shift through. And again, Show's presentation before showed you some of the projects that we have been active on and that we continue to be active on to help their mission. That's the site in big screen. So you can see how close we are to Sellafield in the top right-hand corner. We're on the west coast of Cumbria. That is like a typical day, West Cumbria, sunny all the time. Don't tell your friends, otherwise we'll have nowhere to live. And in the top of the picture, you can see some red shapes there. That's where all the waste sits. And you can see that a lot of our site is fairly green. There's not much there. But a load of work goes into maintaining that site so that the UK has somewhere to put its lower activity waste. So there's only one of those, and it's our job to protect that national asset as best we can and to maintain it for your use when appropriate. So here's the numbers bit. So there was a theme from some of the previous presenters about the SME spend and other things, but I thought these figures gave you a bit of the characteristics of the money that I oversee us spending. I mentioned that we do the services for our customers, and you can see that within that 53 or so million a year, a fair proportion of that comes from our NDA estate and MOD customers via our frameworks. We're heavily orientated to a smaller top 20 number of suppliers, but still via our direct and indirect, we do have a fairly healthy SME spend. Again, name checking Show Dutter, it's not just about the targets, because the more SMEs I have, I tend to have a more competitive marketplace. I tend to get a better value offering. So there's more than it just to targets. It actually means I may be less susceptible to market failure if I have a market with lots of suppliers within it. So the old Porter's 5-force model I step back to, and I think that's one of the reasons why we need to push SMEs as well. What do we do for that 53 or so million? Well, we kind of buy a fair spread of everything that some of the larger organisations buy. So even though we're quite small, we still have quite a broad spectrum of things that we do. And there are the examples. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with those and may even be our current suppliers. So that was last financial year. What does this year look like? Well, I gave us the last 2 quarters of information as well. So no big change. We're in the last year of our current parent body organisation M&O contract, so we're still operating under the parent body organisation model, and And so we currently have a business case in with the NDA proposing the next 5 or so years of work, and we hope to have an answer on that by the end of November. And hence I don't have a solid forecast of what the next few years looks like. But I'll tell you where to find that later. So there you go. Okay, into the third of the 4 quarters. So this is talking about our environment. So some of these topics got mentioned earlier today with our keynote speakers and also some of my peers earlier. I think my profession in the public sector is seeing and will continue to see greater focus on performance, whether that's making sure you're compliant, you're managing risk correctly, you're obtaining value for money and doing the things that you said you would do. And I've pointed to 4 things that you can find on the internet yourself to see evidence of that pressure that's coming on us. That is not an observation that I think that pressure's wrong. I think that's just where we are at the moment. And so it's part of my job to make sure that LLWR stays ahead of that expectation of our stakeholders, yourselves as taxpayers, and that we're performing at the right level. How can I try to secure that performance? By making sure my people have the right skills and abilities. So that's something, they're the 2 things I tend to think about in my role as slightly more outward facing rather than contract specific. So that's partly to do with the environment in which me and my team and therefore my company operates. With that does bring more scrutiny and a need to demonstrate value. So, we need to get better at writing business cases and sourcing strategies, acquisition strategies, etc. Previously, I mentioned a little bit about our parent body and the new contract extension. What can I tell you about the next 5 years? Well, I got a little bit, I've written some informal statements there, which I think encapsulates it quite well, bearing in mind it's not actually been sanctioned yet. But we aim to continue providing waste services to the UK industry that will hopefully match with the needs of the industry, whether that's more specific, complex waste management solutions or a more commoditized spot price, use as you go, pay as you go kind of approach, whatever our customers feel best fits with their service needs and also risk appetite. But on the site specifically, and it is starting to move a little bit more towards the site, we want to make sure that we're, in order to match the customer needs, can we gradually increase the range of services or the capability of disposal services and perhaps storage services on our site that our customers can benefit from. Perhaps that would maybe allow them to avoid building a particular store if we're able to take a proportion of that waste that might be acceptable for us. But obviously to do that, to complement the first 2, we need to make sure we finish off what we've already said we would do in terms of developing both the repository vaults where we store things. We need to eventually start to cap those over and make them safe for our future generations. And also make sure that the site operates efficiently with our assets and our infrastructure. We need to keep it healthy. Okay, so that's the external bit and what's coming in the future. A little bit more focused on the procurement side. Please remember that website address, because that's what you can say. That's where you can look every month of the latest procurement plan. And it's also got all the contact names. So if you meet somebody on my stand today and you can't remember who they are, that might jog your memory because they've got their names and phone numbers and emails there for you to check at any time on the internet. Jonathan Evans mentioned some of the frameworks that we're involved with, and there's a bit of a repeat of that again. And another little bit of management focus. I'm trying to make sure we're focusing our, perhaps the members of my team who deal with the lower complexity, lower value purchases and the lower value contracts, make sure we're not just taking them for granted, put some emphasis into those and make sure you're getting the best value deal. And then at the other end of the scale, if you bear with me on that, do my procurement people understand the business cases, program outcomes, and benefits that are needed? The days of just celebrating because we ran a compliant procurement are gone. That's just a given. So I expect us to be able to say the procurement was successful because it supports the business case and program outcomes needed. And then because I've tried to give you an overarching umbrella presentation pointing to a few tools for you to use in future, such as the procurement plan, I wanted to finish with what you can get if you go to our stand now. So there's people there who can talk to you with a little bit of a handout about some of the general things our procurement teams are doing, trying to focus on SMEs again, but also ways of engaging with us that maybe save you time and money or make it more agile. And then I've got my 3 leads on waste management services, business and functional services, and the site programs there, Alison, Martin, and Emma, who can talk to you in a bit more detail about some of our programs. And that is me. Thank you very much.